Alright, congratulations guys, you've made it to the end of yet another tutorial. This has been on text fields in Xcode 10, and we've been using Swift 3 to code this up. So let's just go over what we've learned. This, I'm just going to go back to our storyboard. I'm just going to close that up. So, we started off first by talking about what a text field is. A text field is basically just this kind of input box that allows the user to input some kind of a text. Now we can put restrictions on what kind of text the user inputs if we want, but if we don't add these restrictions, user can input whatever text. And if we want to take that into the code, we take it in as a string and we output it as a string also. So this just allows the user to input some kind of a text which we can then handle in some way. So we added the text view in this way, the same way as we added in the label and the button. We just dragged and dropped it. And we also added in this button and this label. So the button was just to handle the input and the label was just to handle the display. So we then initialized our text field the same way as we did the label and button in the code. We right-clicked or said control and dragged. So you can either right-click and drag or control and drag, and it will add it in as an outlet. So we added in these outlets up top here. We had the txt text field is what we called it, and we also had the button and the label. Okay, and then we also added in the button handling function, and that's going to be the same things we've seen in the button tutorial. So our first task was just to kind of have our input text displayed in our label first once the button was pressed, and we did that pretty easily just with this one line of code here where we just had our label text equals our text field text once the button was pressed. So when the button was pressed, took whatever text was currently in here and displayed it in here. And that was easy enough, just took one line of code and our button function. Next we looked at how to do the same thing but using the phone keyboard itself. So what we did is we first added in this UI text field delegate, then we added in this line, the .delegate equals self, and then we added in these two functions which are the the text field should return and the did end editing. So this function just kind of made the keyboard disappear once a return button was pressed. This function actually, once a return button was pressed, changed our label text to contain whatever text was currently displayed here. So that's what those two functions were doing, and that's how we had our text display upon the return key press rather than on the button press. And there are downsides and upsides to both. One being that we can, if we have the phone keyboard, we can't use the laptop keyboard. The second being that if we were using the phone keyboard, we didn't have to add in that extra button. Next thing we looked at was how to modify how to take in the input and kind of do something with it. So we created this double number function which just took in our input, converted it to a double, and then called this function which just doubled our number input, changed it back to a string, and then displayed it as our label text. Okay, so this was just one of the examples of many things you can do when you handle the text. So you can take it in, store it in variables, and do whatever you'd like with it. Okay, so that's going to be a very common thing we're going to see in a lot of the apps that we'll build in the future tutorials. Next we looked at how to modify properties using the attributes inspector, and that was simple enough. We just select the one we want, select the view we want to modify, we pull up our toolbar, and then we can go into the attributes inspector and modify the attributes directly here. We can also modify the layout in the size inspector. The next thing we did is we went into the code itself, and just closing this up. So we went into the code and modified some of the fields by calling the text field the name and then dot, and it gave us this big list of functions and properties that we could modify this way. Okay, so that's our tutorial on text fields in Xcode 10. We use Swift 3 to code this up. We have our layout here in main.storyboard, and the code went in viewController.swift. Alright, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you learned a lot about text fields. I urge you to go ahead and try out some of those other methods and properties and modify some of those other attributes, because I think that's the best way to learn and get comfortable with working with these text fields, is just to kind of spend a lot of time with them, working with them, modifying them, creating them, deleting them, and using them in general. Alright, again, thanks for watching the tutorial. We will see you next time.